a very simplistic way describing, and it's a theoretical model. Most probably you can apply a model that is more accurate towards one of the suppliers. But if you look at these, what we call the printed circuit boards or printed wire boards, abbreviated as PCBAs, how the supply chain looks like, it is always global because of the specialization of different countries. What you've got the silicon ingots, then they are being cut into these tiny blades called wafers. Then you have so-called fabrication, manufacturing, while the semiconductors are created on the wafers. Then the wafers are being cut. Then there are multiple other operations depending on the application. Usually somewhere in Taiwan, Malaysia, and then they move for PCBA manufacturing. So actually jumping on the printed circuit board, on the silicon board, which is being done all over the world. But you can clearly see that because of the regionalization and specialization, you have had a very complex supply chain. And what has happened because of that dynamics in COVID, I was trying to explain at the previous slide, when various areas in the world has been affected at a various moment of time, it actually reinforced the effect. So the amplitude of impact in a wave diagram is even higher. And what has happened, if you look at that, COVID-19, we call it, because it happened in the late 19 in China, the biggest effect. Then what has happened, you had the snowstorms in Texas, and to no surprise, one of the largest manufacturers of ICs is Texas Instruments. So 2 months off when it comes to production. Then you had Malaysia, Thailand being locked in a martial law for a month and a half. So some of the LED producers were cut off. And then you've had the fire in March in Naka factory of Renesas, one of the key manufacturers in the world. And then just to top it, there's been a given crisis. So all of that is simply killing the supply chain that we've built ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So this is how you understand the allocation as a term. And thank you very much, Mateusz, as well for
allocation
giving the example.
Is an outcome of that.
Yeah. So thank you as well for sharing with us an example. Piotr, how does it look from your end? Would you share the view on the definition that Mateusz provided, and if and how your supply chains have been impacted so far by the allocation in your industry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, thanks, Rafał, for having me here, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to share some of the thoughts with you. Look, in terms of the allocation of the resources, the way I see it is coming from the very basic definition that allocation of the resources is simply a limitation of productive assets among different users and customers, and that resource allocation arises mainly as an issue when these resources are actually in limited supply. And it's not like the allocation of resources which we see today as a result of the pandemic is something very unique. I think we had it, in the past, or it's actually is a part of the normal, economical environment. What is very unique this time, and some of this already, was captured by Matt, and I will talk more about this in terms of the logistics, is that the allocation of resources usually is well regulated by the price system or the cost system, and this is the primary mechanism through which these limited resources are actually distributed among the users, which need them most, or which they desire them in the most way, so they are able to pay the highest price. With the pandemic crisis, the price mechanism is not effective anymore. Simply, it's gone, and there are other mechanisms becoming, preferential, dominant. It's very interesting to understand what are these other mechanisms, but I think the biggest learnings for me and for my team that. Again, coming back to logistics, in terms of in a situation when we have very limited allocation of the logistic resources, the price doesn't matter anymore. So in the past, the Pan-Pacific routes from Vietnam to US for one container was around 1,000 euro. Beginning of this year, it was 8,000 euro. Today, if you want to pay 20,000 euro, it doesn't really matter. Simply, there's no vessel available, and the price is not any point, doesn't make any point of the difference anymore. The question is what does actually, because that will, you know, let us to understand better how we should really react or how we position ourselves in the times of the allocation.